On New Year's Eve, I was raising a glass to family when my son-in-law's phone lit up on the table. A message flashed across the screen. Did he sign the documents tonight? But that wasn't what froze my blood. It was the sender's photo. My face. My exact face staring back at me. As I leaned closer, my son-in-law snatched the phone and whispered, "Please, don't ask about that." In that instant, I knew something was terribly wrong. That night, I decided to dig deeper. What I uncovered would tear my family and my entire empire apart. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. If this story resonates with you, I'd truly appreciate a like and a subscription to keep this channel growing. I'm also curious, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Before we begin, a quick note. What you're about to hear blends creative storytelling with purposeful lessons designed to both engage and inspire. Any similarities to specific individuals or locations are entirely unintentional. What matters most is the wisdom woven throughout, and I hope it stays with you long after the video ends. The champagne caught the candlelight as I raised my glass that New Year's Eve, the amber liquid sparkling like tiny stars. Around my dining table sat the people I loved most. Emily, my eldest at 40, smiled as she refilled her husband Ryan's wine. Sarah, my youngest, watched everything with the quiet intensity she'd inherited from her mother. 5 years had passed since Catherine died. Yet nights like this made her absence feel physical. The old brick walls of our Gold Coast townhouse, the candles flickering against them, the recipes laid out exactly as she'd written them, everything carried her presence. Through the tall windows on Astor Street Lake, Michigan stretched dark and endless beneath the winter sky, city lights scattering across its surface like diamonds. I'd built Morrison Legacy Realty over 35 years, turning it into one of Chicago's premier luxury firms. But sitting there watching my daughters, I knew Catherine had been right. Not the properties, not the deals. This was what mattered. Family, connection. The things money couldn't buy. Ryan reached for his phone again. 4th time in 20 minutes. I noticed because noticing was what I did. Decades in real estate had trained me to read people to catch the smallest tells. And tonight, Ryan Carter, my son-in-law of 8 years, normally easygoing, was wound tight. His knee bounced under the table. Emily rested a hand on his arm in silent reassurance. But something was wrong. The air felt charged like static before a storm. Sarah set down her fork and studied him with the same penetrating gaze she used behind her camera. She didn't speak, but when she glanced at me, I saw it. She felt it too. The roasted duck was perfect, just as Catherine used to make it. I'd followed her handwritten recipe card, the one with the tiny heart in the corner. The wine was a 20-year Bordeaux I'd been saving. Conversation moved smoothly on the surface. Emily discussing a new client at her financial firm, Sarah excited about her upcoming gallery opening in Wicker Park. Pleasant, ordinary, exactly how it should be. But underneath, something crackled. Ryan's phone buzzed on the table. He'd left it face up beside his wine glass, unusual. He normally kept it screen down or in his pocket. Tonight, it lay there openly lighting up like a signal flare. I wasn't trying to read it. I was reaching for the bread basket when the screen illuminated, and from where I sat, I saw everything. The message, the sender's photo. What stopped my blood wasn't the text itself, though it was strange enough. Did he sign the documents tonight? A simple question. Almost harmless. It was the profile picture. A face I had seen in the mirror for 72 years. The same gray eyes. The same slight asymmetry in the cheekbones only I would recognize. The same lines around the mouth carved by decades of living. My face. My exact face stared back at me from Ryan's phone. My hand froze mid-air. The room seemed to tilt, though nothing had moved. The candles still flickered. Emily was still talking, her voice now, distant, muffled, as if underwater. Sarah had gone quiet, watching me with concern deepening across her brow. Ryan's eyes snapped to the screen, then to me, then back again. The color drained from his face so quickly, I thought he might faint. He grabbed the phone, clutching it to his chest like a shield. Too late. I had seen it. He looked at me with something I'd never seen in him before. Fear, yes, but also guilt and resignation tangled together. His mouth opened, then closed. No explanation came. Emily stopped mid-sentence, finally sensing the shift. She looked between us, confusion replacing her earlier warmth. "Please, Ryan," whispered voice strained. "Don't ask about that message." But the question already filled the room. Who was this person with my face? What documents, and why was my son-in-law involved in something that terrified him? Sarah reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Silent solidarity. She had always read emotions the way others read headlines. Dinner dissolved after that. Ryan barely touched his plate. Emily forced bright chatter about New Year's resolutions, but her voice carried a brittle edge. Sarah helped me clear dishes, her worried glances saying what she didn't. They left just before 11. Ryan hurried Emily toward the car, his movements tense and urgent. She kept looking back at me in the doorway, something like apology or fear in her expression. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the quiet Gold Coast streets. Under the streetlights, they seemed like strangers driving away from a life I thought I understood. I stood there long after their taillights disappeared onto State Street. Snow gathered along the brick sidewalks. The old house settled around me with familiar creaks. Inside the dining room still held warmth candles burning low, Catherine's china waiting to be washed. But all I could see was that face on Ryan's phone. My face. Impossible, undeniable. Somewhere in Chicago's winter night, someone who looked exactly like me was asking about documents I knew nothing about. The house suddenly felt too quiet, too large, too full of unanswered questions. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. Possibilities churned through my mind, identity theft, deception, something far worse. None of them felt real, yet none could be dismissed. 5 years without Catherine had taught me how quickly life could fracture. But this felt different. Deliberate, hidden, calculated. Upstairs, the hallway lights cast long shadows along the walls. I caught my reflection in the mirror by the staircase and studied it as if seeing myself for the first time. 72 years old, successful, careful, not a man easily fooled. And yet someone out there wore my face like a mask. Ryan's whisper echoed in my ears. "Don't ask." Which meant, of course, that I would. I turned off the lights one by one, leaving only the glow from the living room window overlooking Lake Michigan. Snow fell steadily now, softening the city's sharp edges. Something had shifted tonight, something fundamental. And whatever it was, it had my face. Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, that face flickered behind my eyelids like an unsettling neon sign. My face. On Ryan's phone. Asking about documents I had no knowledge of. At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep and made my way to the study, my hand trailing the mahogany banister Catherine had refinished years ago. This was her room, our war room, where she had helped me turn Morrison Legacy from a small real estate listing into a major firm. Her presence was still everywhere. The leather-bound books, the Persian rug from Lincoln Park, the desk lamp casting familiar shadows. Through the windows, Chicago's skyline gleamed against the darkness. Lake Michigan a black void in the distance. The distant hum of traffic on Lakeshore Drive filled the quiet house. The New Year's revelers were going home while my own world seemed to be unraveling. I opened my laptop and began methodically searching through my email archives. Client communications, property listings, Nathan's year-end financial summaries, all normal. but something felt off. I'd built my career on attention to detail. 40 years in real estate had taught me that the devil lay in the fine print. When I saw the folder labeled estate planning, urgent, my stomach sank. I didn't create that folder. My filing system was precise, every document had its place. Catherine used to tease me about it, but I never missed anything. My cursor hovered over the folder, but a part of me didn't want to open it. Still, I couldn't ignore it. The first document made my pulse spike. Transfer of ownership, Lakeshore Drive, Penthouse Unit 4201. My penthouse. The one Catherine and I had bought as an investment 15 years ago. The document was official, complete with notary stamps and witness signatures. It showed the property being transferred to someone named Michael Marshall. I didn't know anyone by that name. The second document was worse. Power of attorney dated 3 weeks ago, giving Michael Marshall control over my financial affairs. The signature at the bottom was mine. Perfect. Unmistakable. But I never signed that document. I would have remembered. The third document made my hands tremble. Medical evaluation dated 3 weeks ago at Newbury Medical Center. The diagnosis: diminished mental capacity, early-stage dementia. The recommendation: legal guardian required. And again, there was my signature, flawless. But I'd never been to Newbury Medical Center. Never met a Dr. Harrison. Someone had forged these documents. Someone with access to my signature, my life, my legacy. My heart raced. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking as I scrolled through my contacts. Kate Brennan. She'd been my lawyer for 20 years, a trusted friend. She would make sense of this. The phone rang 3 times. It was after midnight. She was probably at a party. But on the 4th ring, she picked up, her voice groggy. "Vernon," she said, using my first name like only she ever did. "What's wrong? Has anyone filed documents regarding my properties or mental capacity recently?" I asked, my voice tight. There was a long pause. "Vernon," she finally said, voice cautious. "You asked me to process those documents 3 weeks ago. You came to my office. That was you, wasn't it?" I froze. "I haven't been to your office since October." Her sharp intake of breath spoke volumes. "Oh my God. Stay there. I'm coming now. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to anyone." She hung up before I could respond. 25 minutes felt like hours. I couldn't sit still. The documents on the screen haunted me, evidence of a crime I hadn't committed. Someone was stealing my life. When the doorbell rang, I practically ran to the stairs. Kate swept in, her cocktail dress from the party still on her heels, kicked off in the foyer. She looked both flustered and focused, the briefcase she clutched in her hands like a shield. She knew what this call meant. "Show me," she said immediately. I led her upstairs. She sat at my desk, scanning each document with her practiced, professional eyes. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw her subtly stiffen. She pressed harder against the desk with each document. "This is sophisticated," she said finally. "The notary stamps are real. Dr. Harrison exists, legitimate practice on Newbury Street in Boston. The power of attorney language is airtight. Legal terminology is perfect." She looked at me, something in her eyes I had never seen before: fear. 3 weeks ago, someone came to my office claiming to be you," she said. "They had a Massachusetts driver's license with your name, your photo. They discussed estate planning, said you were worried about your children fighting over assets. Said you wanted everything clearly documented." She paused, her eyes locked on mine. "Vernon, they looked exactly like you. Same height, same build, same mannerisms. If I hadn't known you for 20 years, if I hadn't noticed how nervous they seemed, how they kept checking their phone like they were waiting for instructions." She trailed off, but I understood. Someone had impersonated me. They had walked into my lawyer's office, convinced her they were me, and started the process of stealing everything I'd built. "Kate," I said, voice rough, "I need to tell you something I've kept hidden for 65 years. She waited, never breaking eye contact, her lawyer's intuition fully engaged. I set my hands on the desk. to stop them from shaking. I had a twin brother. We were separated when we were 7 years old. Kate set her wine glass down with deliberate care, the crystal clinking against wood. Outside dawn began softening the darkness over Lake Michigan. The city held that strange New Year's morning quiet, suspended between celebration's end and day's beginning. In that moment, I told her the story I'd buried for decades. We were 7 when our mother died. I remembered her face, dark hair, gentle hands, laughter like music. She'd been sick for months, something with her lungs the doctors couldn't fix. Back then, medicine wasn't what it is now. People died young and families broke apart. Our father tried. He was a factory worker on the south side pulling double shifts just to keep food on the table. But when Mom passed, he couldn't manage 2 7-year-old boys alone. The apartment was too small, the money too tight, and grief was drowning him. The social worker came on a Tuesday afternoon, our favorite day, because Mom used to take us to the playground near the lake. The swings, I told Kate, my voice catching. We'd race to see who could get there first. He always won because I always cheated. The memory hurt more than expected. She told us we were going to different families. Good families who wanted to help. My father sat on our threadbare couch, head in hands, while she explained with that careful, gentle voice people use when they're about to destroy your world. She said it was temporary just until Dad could get back on his feet. But 7-year-olds aren't stupid. We knew what goodbye looked like. They took me first. The Morrison family lived in Lincoln Park, old Chicago money, summering in Lake Geneva and wintering in Palm Springs. Robert Morrison owned a manufacturing company, and his wife Eleanor had always wanted a son, but couldn't have children. They gave me their name, their home, their entire world. Private schools, piano lessons, summer camps in Wisconsin. They loved me as much as adoptive parents could love a frightened kid who cried himself to sleep for the first year. But they never told me what happened to my brother. Kate listened without interrupting her lawyer's training, keeping her face neutral, though I saw the empathy in her eyes. I didn't find out until I was 18, I continued. About to leave for Northwestern, thinking I'd put that past behind me. I hired an investigator, spent my graduation money on it. Took him 3 months to track down the records. Michael had gone to a family in Evanston. The Marshalls. Nice enough people until 3 years in, they had a biological son. Then suddenly they didn't need a damaged foster kid anymore. They returned him to the state like a library book they'd finished with. I watched Kate's expression shift from sympathy to something harder. Anger, maybe. Disgust at a system that treated children like commodities. After the Marshalls, he went through 7 more homes. 7. Some lasted months, others barely weeks. The files said he was difficult, behavioral problems, trust issues. Well, no kidding. What would you expect from a kid who'd been rejected repeatedly, who'd lost his mother, father, and twin brother all before age 10? He aged out at 18 with nothing. No family, no support system, just a high school diploma and a chip on his shoulder the size of Illinois. I paused, taking a breath. The study felt smaller, somehow filled with ghosts I'd spent decades trying to forget. I didn't learn all this until much later. When I was 40, successful, married to Catherine, starting to think about legacy and family. I hired another investigator, better, more expensive. He found Michael in Pittsburgh. Working construction, married to a woman named Helen, had a daughter. Barely scraping by, but alive, and that felt like something. I sent 3 letters over 6 months. Told him who I was, where I'd ended up, asked if we could talk. Maybe meet. I wanted to know him, Kate. Wanted to understand what those years had done to him, if we could somehow bridge all that lost time. Every letter came back unopened. Returned to sender, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. His wife's maybe, or his own. After the 3rd one, I stopped trying. Maybe I was a reminder of everything he'd lost. Maybe it was easier for him to pretend I didn't exist than to face that one of us had gotten lucky while the other had gotten destroyed by the system. Kate finally spoke, her voice careful. And you never tried again. I shook my head. What was the point? He'd made his choice clear. I had my own life, my own family. Catherine and I were building Morrison legacy. The girls were young. I told myself it was better to leave the past alone, but it never really left me alone. I thought about him on birthdays, wondered if we still resembled each other, if he'd found happiness, if his daughter looked like him or like her mother. Now I knew part of it. He had a daughter. Her name was probably Rebecca. And somewhere along the way, bitterness had turned into desperation, and desperation into crime. Kate stood and began pacing her sharp legal mind, working through implications. Vernon, this changes everything. This isn't just identity theft by some random criminal. This is family. This is 65 years of pain and resentment coming home to roost. And that makes it infinitely more complicated. The law doesn't care about emotional context, but juries do. Prosecutors do. She didn't need to finish. I understood. This wasn't going to be a clean, legal battle. This was going to be messy, emotional, a public airing of family dysfunction that would make every Chicago tabloid salivate. Kate walked to the window, looking out at the awakening city. The sky was lighter now, streaks of pink and gold painting clouds over the lake. She spoke without turning around, her voice quiet but firm. If someone with your face has been impersonating you, Vernon, we need to know the full extent. The documents are just what we found. But what else have they accessed? Your bank accounts, your business, your clients. She finally looked at me, and I saw the fear that matched my own. How much of your life has already been stolen? The doorbell rang just after 9. I'd sent Kate home an hour earlier, both of us exhausted but too wired to sleep. She'd promised to begin filing for restraining orders first thing after the holiday, though we both knew the courts wouldn't reopen until the 2nd. Through the front window, I saw Ryan's Audi at the curb. My stomach tightened. He was alone, no Emily in the passenger seat, no hopeful wave from my daughter trying to smooth things over, just Ryan sitting behind the wheel for a long moment, before stepping out, shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles bruised his eyes. The dress shirt from last night was wrinkled and untucked. His hands trembled as he rang again, as if unsure I'd answer. I almost didn't, but I needed answers more than I needed the satisfaction of slamming the door. I opened it and stayed planted in the doorway, not moving aside. Let him stand in the cold. Let him feel the weight of it. Ryan, James. He swallowed, eyes flicking past me as if checking whether anyone else was home. Can we talk? Please? I stepped back just enough to let him into the foyer, but no farther. He stood on the marble tiles, looking small and miserable while I remained near the door. A power move maybe, but I'd spent 40 years learning how to use space and silence in negotiations. This was another negotiation. The stakes just happened to be my life. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I made a terrible mistake. I said nothing. In real estate, the first person to fill silence usually loses. It started 6 months ago, he rushed on. A pharmaceutical conference in Philadelphia. I was at the hotel lobby one night and saw someone who looked exactly like you. Same height, same build, same way you stand with your hands in your pockets. He studied my face for reaction. I gave him none. I almost called your name, he continued. But Emily had said you were in the Hamptons that weekend with clients. So I got curious. I approached him, his voice lowered. His name was Michael Morrison. He'd lost his wife, Helen, 8 years ago, working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. He had a daughter, Rebecca, brilliant, works in tech, but she'd been in a bad car accident, and the medical bills buried them. Something cold settled in my chest. Michael, my twin, struggling while I lived in a Gold Coast townhouse worth millions. I felt sorry for him, Ryan said. He told me about a twin brother adopted by a wealthy family while he bounced through foster homes. The bitterness in his voice, he swallowed. I thought maybe I could help. Connect you two. I figured if he reached out himself, you might offer a loan or a job. I didn't think it would hurt anything. But Rebecca had different ideas. I spoke for the first time. What kind of ideas? He flinched. She pointed out how much you have. The company, the properties. She said it wouldn't hurt you to share, that it was practically owed after what Michael went through. And you agreed. Not at first, he insisted. But Rebecca's persuasive. She showed me numbers your net worth property values his debts. She made it sound reasonable, like charity. It wasn't charity, I said, stepping closer. He backed into the wall. It was identity theft. Forgery. Fraud. His face crumpled. I know that now. But she said she just needed information to make things look authentic, bank statements, deeds, samples of your signature. Thanksgiving, I said quietly. He nodded miserably. You offered to let me help in the kitchen. While you were cooking, I went into your study. I photographed everything on your desk, account numbers, client files, the property folder. Rebecca said you'd never know. 40 years I'd built Morrison Legacy on trust. While I was teaching him Catherine's stuffing recipe, he was upstairs photographing my life. How much, I asked. What? How much were they paying you? Nothing. His eyes widened. I swear, I wasn't in it for money. I just wanted to help. The lie hung between us, though I wouldn't know the full extent for days. For now, I saw what he wanted me to see, a naive fool manipulated by a desperate father and his brilliant daughter. I tried to stop it. He rushed on. Last week, I told Rebecca we'd gone too far. She threatened me. Said if I backed out, she'd send everything to Emily, the photos, the messages. She'd make sure I went to prison for conspiracy. My fingerprints are all over this. So you're being blackmailed, I said flatly. By the people you helped. Yes. His voice cracked. I'm trapped. I thought if I told you, maybe we could stop this without destroying everyone. I studied him. Part of me wanted to throw him out and call Emily, but I needed information. Give me Rebecca's number. He recited it with shaking hands. I entered it into my phone and labeled it simply R. Anything else? He hesitated. Fear flickered across his face. Michael's dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 3 to 6 months. The words landed like a blow. My twin brother, separated at 7, lost for 65 years, was dying. Instead of reconciliation, he was entangled in a scheme to steal from me. Or perhaps he was trying to secure something for his daughter before he was gone. My anger wavered, replaced by something knotted and complicated: grief for lost decades, fury at the deception, pity for a man desperate enough to gamble everything. Get out, I said quietly. Go home to Emily. Figure out how you're going to tell her, because she will find out. But right now, leave. He nodded, pale. I'm sorry, James. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I don't think Michael wanted this to go so far. Rebecca's pushing it. He just wants her safe. I didn't answer. I watched him drive away into the cold Chicago morning and stood in the foyer feeling the ground shift again beneath my feet. My brother was dying, and I was running out of time to decide what to do about the wreckage he'd created trying to protect his child. Ryan's taillights had barely vanished around the corner before I pulled out my phone. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. If what he'd said was true, if Rebecca Morrison really had the technical skill he described, then Morrison Legacy's entire infrastructure could be compromised. 40 years of client relationships, confidential deals, proprietary data, all of it exposed. I scrolled to Nathan Brooks and hit dial. He answered on the second ring, voice sharp despite the early hour. James. Happy New Year. Nathan, I need you at my house. Now, it's an emergency. He didn't ask questions. 40 minutes. He arrived in 37. Nathan had been my IT director for 5 years. Hired after a competitor attempted a breach during our expansion into the luxury condo market. 42, former cybersecurity contractor for a defense firm. I'd poached him with a salary high enough that his wife quit teaching. He was worth every penny, methodical, paranoid, exactly the man you wanted guarding digital assets. He walked in, wearing jeans and a Northwestern hoodie laptop bag, already over his shoulder. I led him to my study. He sat up at my desk without ceremony, fingers flying before I'd finished explaining. "Show me Ryan's confession," he said, eyes fixed on the screen. I handed over the notes I'd typed during Ryan's visit, details about credentials, timing, Thanksgiving access. Nathan skimmed once, then took control of my laptop. "How bad is it?" I asked. He raised a finger. "Give me a minute." The minute became 10, then 20. I paced while lines of code scrolled past. Logs, access records, hieroglyphics to me. Nathan's jaw tightened with each new screen. Finally, he leaned back, face grim. "James, you've been compromised for 3 months. Since early October. 3 months. He turned the laptop toward me, pointing to dense data. Someone used Ryan's legitimate credentials to install a persistent backdoor. Sophisticated. Even if we reset passwords right now, they've created a hidden access route. Think of it as a duplicate key and a door you don't know exists." What did they access? Another screen? This one I understood. File access logs, download timestamps going back to October 5th. Everything Nathan said. Client contracts, financial records, private communications, property valuations, confidentiality agreements. If it had value in Morrison Legacy's system, they took it. Mass downloads to encrypted external storage, routed through proxy servers. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't amateur work. My mind ran through the implications. Our clients were Chicago's elite entrepreneurs, guarding second homes, politicians hiding discreet holdings, celebrities buying penthouses through LLCs, foreign investors obsessed with privacy. Morrison Legacy had been built on one promise: absolute discretion. And now someone possessed it all. "What happens if it goes public?" I asked. Nathan didn't soften it. "Lawsuits. From everyone whose privacy was breached." Morrison Legacy's valuation is about $125 million, right? That's correct. Exposure like this could generate 3 times that in damages. $375 million, maybe more. It would bankrupt you personally and destroy the company. The room tilted. 35 years building from a single Cambridge studio listing to one of Chicago's premier firms, and my own son-in-law had handed the keys to someone with the skill to weaponize them. "Can you lock them out?" "Yes," Nathan said, already typing. "But we'll need to rebuild the security architecture from scratch. Full system shutdown for 48 hours minimum." He paused. "But locking them out doesn't erase what they already downloaded." "Meaning, they can still release it, sell it, send it to media. All we can do is prevent further damage." I moved to the window overlooking Lake Michigan. The water was gray and restless whitecaps visible in the winter wind. Across the city, people were nursing hangovers, planning fresh starts, and I was watching my life's work balance on the edge. Morrison Legacy wasn't just a company. It was proof the frightened 7-year-old boy the Morrisons adopted could build something lasting. It was Catherine beside me through every deal. It was the inheritance I meant to leave Emily and Sarah. Nathan's voice cut through. "We need to move fast. Police reports. Lawyers. Possibly the FBI. This is federal-level cybercrime." I nodded, but my thoughts were already racing ahead. Investigations took time. If Rebecca decided to release the data tonight, it wouldn't matter how many agencies were involved. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I expected Kate. Maybe Emily. Instead, an unknown number. Chicago area code. The message was short. "Hello, brother. Time to talk. Meet me at Navy Pier, 6 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the screen. After 65 years of silence, my twin brother had chosen this moment to reach out. Not with apology, not with reconciliation, with a summons. Nathan continued muttering about incident response plans, unaware that the crisis had just become personal. I read the message again. 6 p.m. Navy Pier. Public enough to feel safe. Crowded enough to disappear in. I need you to start the lockdown, I told Nathan. Full protocol. Don't wait for approval. He looked up. You going somewhere? Yes. Is that wise? Probably not. He nodded once. I'll have the system offline within the hour. I stepped back toward the window. 8 hours until 6. 8 hours to decide whether I was walking into negotiation or trap. 8 hours to prepare for the man who shared my face and apparently my capacity for strategy. Michael was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 3 to 6 months. Was this extortion? A final attempt to secure his daughter's future? Or something more complicated, resentment layered over regret, desperation tangled with pride? I typed a single reply. I'll be there. Then I locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. For months I had been reacting to Ryan's confession, to forged documents, to digital breaches. For the first time since that phone lit up at dinner, I had a target. A place. A time. Whatever 65 years apart had turned my brother into, I was going to look him in the eye and find out. This time I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through my overcoat like a blade. I pulled the collar tighter as I walked along Navy Pier, wooden planks creaking beneath my shoes. The tourist shops were shuttered, the Ferris wheel frozen against the gray January sky. At 6 on New Year's Day, the pier belonged to gulls, wind, and silence. A lone figure stood at the far end, framed against the water. Even from a distance, something in the posture struck me with unsettling familiarity. Hands in pockets. Shoulders slightly forward. I'd seen that stance in mirrors for 72 years. I forced myself to keep walking. When I was close enough to make out his features, the recognition hit like a blow. The bone structure was identical, the Morrison jawline, the high cheekbones our mother gave us, but time had carved us differently. He was thinner, fragile. His skin carried a yellow tint I recognized from oncology wards. He turned fully when I stopped 20 feet away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Two old men staring at versions of ourselves we hadn't seen since childhood. Hello, James? His voice was rough, worn down by cigarettes and hard years. Michael. Saying his name felt foreign after 65 years of silence. You look well, he said, eyes sweeping over my coat, my stance. Prosperous. You look sick, I replied evenly. How long? A bitter smile tugged at his mouth. 3 to 6 months. Stage 4, pancreatic. Caught it too late. He tapped his abdomen lightly. They catch everything too late. Snow began to drift between us. So this is how you reach out, I asked. By trying to destroy me. Destroy you. He let out a harsh laugh. You were destroyed for me the day that social worker put you in the Morrison car and left me behind. You got Lincoln Park and private schools. I got foster homes and factory shifts. I tried to find you. 40 years ago I hired, I know. His jaw tightened, and I sent every letter back. You think money and apologies fix being abandoned. Before I could respond, movement caught my eye. A woman stepped from the shadow of the closed tourist center. Early 30s, dark hair pulled tight. Efficient, watchful. Her gaze assessed me like inventory. Rebecca, I said. Mr. Morrison, she replied coolly. The successful one. Your daughter, I said to Michael. My daughter. He confirmed, pride slipping through the bitterness. MIT. Smartest person I've ever known. Gave up more than she should have. Rebecca moved closer to him, steadying him without drawing attention to it. The gesture was practiced. I'm sorry about Helen, I said quietly. Are you? Michael's voice sharpened. Sorry enough to act. Rebecca pulled out her phone. We're not here for sentiment. We're here for terms. She turned the screen toward me. Files, spreadsheets, client names I knew intimately. Morrison Legacy, she said. 3 months of data, contracts, private communications, offshore holdings, divorce settlements, immigration records. Ice slid down my spine. Every name she'd mentioned could detonate a career. How did you? Ryan was helpful, she said. He thought he was being kind, which is what I demanded. Money, Justice Michael said flatly. You had everything. I had nothing. Now I'm dying in a one-bedroom in Logan Square while you sit in a townhouse worth millions. 8.2, Rebecca corrected calmly. The Lakeshore Drive penthouse. That's what we want. The words felt surreal. You're serious. I'm practical, she said. The penthouse transfers to my father by 5 tomorrow afternoon. Clean transfer, no reversals. And if it doesn't, at 9 Monday morning, everything goes public. Tribune, your top competitors, the Cook County District Attorney. That would destroy innocent people. Michael laughed bitterly. No one on your client list is innocent. They'll survive. I didn't. Dad needs security, Rebecca said. 3 to 6 months. He deserves to spend them somewhere dignified. After that, I need protection. The penthouse guarantees both. And if I refuse, then you learn what losing everything feels like. She slid the phone back into her pocket. 23 hours. She took Michael's arm. He didn't protest. They turned toward the parking lot, her pace steady, his steps uneven. I watched my mirror image lean into his daughter's support, snow settling across his shoulders. 65 years, that was how long it had taken for my twin to return to my life. Not with reconciliation, but with leverage. The wind strengthened, pushing snow across the boards. I stood alone at the end of the pier, staring at the dark lake. Part of me understood his rage. The boy left behind. The man who watched his brother inherit comfort and stability. The father trying to secure his daughter's future before death closed in. But understanding didn't erase what they were doing. They were holding my company hostage. My clients. My daughter's inheritance. Catherine's legacy. 23 hours. I turned back toward the city lights, already organizing the next steps. Kate. Detective Walsh in economic crimes. Emily and Sarah would have to know. Nathan would need to tighten every system that could still be tightened. I had built Morrison Legacy once from nothing. I knew how to operate under pressure, how to negotiate from the edge of collapse. The difference this time was blood. As I reached my car, snow gathering on the windshield, I paused for one final glance at the pier. Somewhere out there, my twin brother, my other half, was walking toward the end of his life, believing this was justice. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. 23 hours to protect everything I had built. 23 hours to decide whether I would save my empire or sacrifice a piece of it for the man who shared my face. By the time I pulled into my garage, I had already made 4 calls. Kate first, then Detective Marcus Walsh, then Emily and Sarah. Within an hour, all of them were seated in my study, the fire crackling in the hearth, doing nothing to warm the cold that had settled over us. Kate stood near the window, overlooking the snow-dusted street, her cocktail dress replaced by a severe charcoal suit that signaled war. Detective Walsh occupied the leather chair Catherine once favored, notebook open expression carved from stone. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, hands twisted tightly together. Sarah leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed, eyes observant and painfully calm. Walsh flipped a page in his notebook. Let me make sure I've got this straight. Your twin brother, missing for 65 years, reappears with his daughter. She's obtained 3 months of Morrison Legacy data. They demand your $8.2 million penthouse transferred by 5 tomorrow, or they leak everything. That's accurate, I said, and Ryan helped by photographing documents during Thanksgiving. Walsh added, glancing at Emily. No offense, none taken. Emily said, her voice thin. I still can't believe her words faltered. Sarah moved beside her, squeezing her hand. Kate turned from the window. We can secure an emergency restraining order tonight. Computer fraud, identity theft, extortion. We have Ryan's statement, the forged documents, Nathan's logs. A judge will sign. And then I asked, we arrest Rebecca, and if she's built a dead man's switch, scheduled uploads if she doesn't check in. I looked at Walsh. If she's anticipated that. Walsh leaned forward. Cybercriminals often prepare contingencies. We'd need to catch her actively attempting transmission. Otherwise, even in custody, the data might still go live. Once it's public, Kate said. Your clients will sue regardless. Privacy violations, breach of fiduciary duty, negligence. The lawsuits could exceed Morrison Legacy's valuation. The fire popped sparks, rising briefly before fading. 35 years of work felt compressed into 23 ticking hours. Just pay them. Emily's voice was quiet but firm. Dad, it's one apartment versus everything else. Your company, your clients, people's lives. Give them the penthouse. It isn't about the money. Then what is it about Emily? Stood legal instincts surfacing despite her pain. This is cost-benefit analysis. You lose an asset you rarely use and preserve everything else. Your sister isn't wrong, Kate said carefully. Sometimes paying is the pragmatic solution. No, I said evenly. Because it won't end there. Rebecca has already proven she can breach our systems. If we pay once, we signal vulnerability. What stops her from returning in 6 months, a year? Extortion ends when leverage disappears, not when it's rewarded. Or when the victim collapses, Walsh muttered. Sarah finally spoke. Dad, they're family. I looked at her sharply. Michael is your twin, she continued. Separated as children. He's had a hard life. He's dying. Her voice trembled but held steady. I'm not excusing Rebecca, but maybe this doesn't have to end in jail or ruin. Maybe you talk to him. Brother to brother. Sarah, Emily began. No, Kate interrupted gently. She's raising a valid point. James, you've avoided this history for decades. I moved to the window. Snow was gathering under the streetlights. I saw Michael's face again at Navy Pier, gaunt, yellowed, angry, and tired. My twin. The boy who rode in the other car that day. That doesn't justify theft, I said quietly. No, Walsh agreed. But if you separate Michael from his daughter's strategy, you might learn what he actually wants. You think he wants reconciliation, I said. I think he wants to matter, Sarah replied. To be acknowledged by the one person who shared his beginning. Silence settled over us. I thought of 7-year-olds separated without choice, of surnames that shaped destinies, of the strange lottery of adoption. There is another approach, Walsh said slowly. If we coordinate surveillance during your meeting, we might catch Rebecca attempting to trigger something. But the timing would need to be precise. That's a risk, Kate warned, a large one. Everything about this is a risk, I replied. I pulled out my phone and typed to Michael's number. Meet me tonight, 10 p.m. Lincoln Park near the zoo entrance. Just us. No Rebecca. No lawyers. I hit send. 30 seconds later, I'll be there. Kate exhaled. James, I need to try, I said. Before this becomes war. Before we destroy what little chance there is for something else. Emily stood and wrapped her arms around me the way she had as a child after nightmares. Be careful. Always I lied. Walsh stepped into the hallway already on his phone. Kate scribbled notes, planning contingencies. Sarah watched me with Catherine's steady gaze as if measuring whether I was walking toward reconciliation or ruin. 2 hours. In 2 hours, I would meet my twin brother again. Not as adversaries in a business transaction, but as two men shaped by a single childhood fracture. Outside, the snowfall thickened, blanketing Chicago in quiet white. The city looked clean from a distance, as if mistakes could be erased by accumulation. I knew better, but somewhere beneath decades of resentment and strategy, beneath forged signatures and breached servers, there had once been two boys who shared everything. If any thread still connected us, I had to find it. Before the clock ran out, snow drifted in slow spirals beneath the streetlights as I walked deeper into Lincoln Park. My breath clouded in front of me, and somewhere beyond the trees, the lake ground ice against the shore. The playground emerged from the darkness, like a preserved memory swings, hanging still slides, rimed with frost benches half buried in white, almost empty. Michael stood by the swing set, one hand wrapped around a chain that squeaked faintly in the wind. Even from 30 feet away, I could see him sway, as if remaining upright required negotiation with his failing body. His coat hung too large on his shrunken frame, and under the yellow park lights, he looked like the echo of a boy I once knew. I stopped a few feet away. I used to dream about this place, he said without turning. Foster homes from Michigan to Ohio. Same dream every time. You and me racing on the swings, seeing who could go higher. You remember? I remember, I said. Before Mom died. Before everything. You cheated. A faint smile touched his mouth. Dragged your feet so I couldn't build momentum. You still won, yeah. His hand tightened on the chain. Last thing I ever won. Snow moved between us. I looked for you, I said. Mid-80s. Hired a detective. Found you in Pittsburgh. Sent letters. I burned them, he replied flatly. Helen showed them to me. I didn't open them. Why? Because anger was easier. He turned then, and the fury in his eyes was alive despite the illness hollowing his face. You got Lincoln Park, private schools, a father who taught you business. I got foster placements that expired when I did. His breathing was shallow now. 7 homes. Some decent, some not. Do you know what it's like being the kid no one chooses, aging out with nothing? No, I said quietly, I don't. You're damn right. He stepped toward me unsteady. You had Catherine, daughters, a company worth a fortune. I had 23 years with Helen before cancer took her, and medical bills that followed me into the grave. Snow gathered on his shoulders on the sparse hair at his temples. You're right, I said. Life wasn't fair. I got lucky in ways I don't fully deserve. You didn't. I'm sorry for that. For the separation. For what you endured. Surprise flickered across his face. But destroying my life won't heal yours, I continued. And putting Rebecca in prison won't bring Helen back. So what? His voice cracked. I die quietly. Except that some people win. Number 1, I moved closer. You let me help. The right way. Not through threats. As brothers. Family, he spat the word. Then let's be family now, I said. Call her. Tell her to delete the files. End this. And then I give you the Lakeshore Drive apartment. The words felt heavy but clear. Not because you extorted me. Because you're my brother. Because I refused to let what happened when we were 7 define the rest. Tears gathered in his eyes. He brushed them away angrily. I don't want charity. It isn't charity. It's reconciliation. But if she releases that data, innocent people get hurt. And she faces federal charges. She's my daughter, I know. She's protecting you the only way she understands. But she's destroying herself. He trembled, cold emotion cancer. Slowly, he pulled out his phone and hit speaker. It rang 3 times. Dad, Rebecca's voice was alert, suspicious. Becky, he said, stop. Delete the files. Walk away. Silence. Then ice. He got to you. No. I'm choosing this. Choosing him. Her laugh was sharp. Too far was 7 foster homes. Too far was Mom dying because we couldn't afford better treatment. This is justice. This is revenge, Michael said. And it will put you in prison. So you choose him over me. After I dropped out of MIT to take care of you. After I worked 3 jobs, you choose the brother who abandoned you. The silence was unbearable. Goodbye, Dad, she said softly. When you're in that fancy apartment he bought with guilt. Remember this. The line went dead. Michael made a broken sound. The phone slipped into the snow. He sagged forward and I caught him startled by how little he weighed. I can't control her, he gasped. She'll release it anyway. Then we stop her together. We already have what we need. Detective Walsh stepped from the shadows, phone in hand. Michael pulled away from me, understanding dawning. You recorded us. This was your choice, I said. You tried to stop her. Walsh nodded. Her statements confirm intent. That call supports a warrant. You did the right thing. Michael looked at me, betrayal and reluctant comprehension tangled in his expression. Snow fell steadily around us. You meant it, he said hoarsely. The apartment. Yes. He searched my face for deception and seemed to find none. She gets the best lawyer you can hire, he said finally, and a fair trial. Done. And I still get the apartment. You're my brother, I replied. That hasn't changed. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. We stood in the frozen playground, where two boys once tried to outdo each other on swings. 65 years of distance had brought us to this moment, recorded strategic imperfect. Not absolution, but perhaps a beginning. Snow settled across the chains, and slides softening edges, muting the world. Michael straightened slowly, leaning on me for balance. Maybe, he said quietly, we can try to win something again. And for the first time that night, I believed we might. I woke on the morning of January 2nd, knowing the illusion of negotiation was over. Michael had tried to rein Rebecca in and failed. The call in the playground had been her line in the sand. If we were going to stop her, we needed to understand not just what she'd taken, but who she truly was. By 9, I was on the phone with David Martinez, a private investigator Kate trusted. Former NYPD, 15 years in cybercrime before going private. Quiet reputation for finding what others missed. I need everything, I told him. Education, employment, associates, financial patterns, digital footprint. I want to know exactly who I'm dealing with. Understood, he said. Preliminaries tonight. He called at 6, sounding energized. Possible breakthrough. Former Morrison Legacy employee Thomas Keener. Fired 2 years ago for unauthorized system access. Rebecca's digital trail overlaps his old credentials. He's got motive and knowledge. For 24 hours, that lead consumed us. Walsh brought Keener in for questioning. Nathan combed through archived logs. I dug up personnel files trying to recall the man. We were so intent on connecting dots that we missed the larger pattern. Martinez called late afternoon on the 3rd. His tone was different. We've been played. My stomach tightened. Explain. Keener has airtight alibis for every major breach timestamp. Security footage from his building. Transaction receipts. Even a traffic citation placing him across town. Rebecca planted breadcrumbs pointing to him. While we chased that, she was doing something else. I leaned against my desk. 24 lost hours. How sophisticated, I asked. Extremely. Most hackers excel at code, not layered misdirection. She's strategic, patient, comfortable thinking multiple moves ahead. That morning had already brought fresh trouble. At 7, Sarah called, her voice tight. Dad checked the Manhattan Observer. I opened the site. The headline landed hard. Chicago real estate mogul in family war. Twin brother claims abandonment. By Jordan Blake. The piece was surgical. Verified facts woven with insinuation. Yes, I had a twin. Yes, we were separated. Yes, he struggled while I prospered. Blake layered anonymous sources suggesting disputed property transfers and questionable financial dealings. Nothing provably false, nothing cleanly libelous, just enough to corrode reputation. Within an hour, my phone lit up. Clients valuing discretion above all else wanted reassurance. Others probed gently about rumors. Kate fielded most of it calm but strained. James, she said, near noon, we can't let this narrative stand unchallenged. What do I say that my brother's daughter is extorting me that confirms scandal? Then a neutral statement. Personal family matter. Ongoing legal review. Neither of us believed that would quiet it. The afternoon escalated further. At 3, my mechanic called. Mr. Morrison, come down, now. In his shop, under harsh fluorescent light, he gestured to the undercarriage of my car. That's not where, he said. That's deliberate. The brake lines had been partially cut. Not enough to fail immediately, just enough to rupture under pressure at speed. If you'd been on the highway, he didn't finish. The air in the garage felt thin. This was no longer cyber leverage. Someone had crossed into physical threat. Any chance of tracing it, I asked. He shook his head. Quick job. Whoever did it knew how. Back home I called Martinez. Rebecca just escalated. The brakes, he said. Already heard. That's not amateur. Either she hired someone or she has partners. Find out which. He called that evening voice edged with gravity. Rebecca Morrison graduated near the top of her MIT computer science class before dropping out junior year. Brief consulting stint, then freelance. Freelance how? Corporate security contracts on the surface. But metadata analysis ties her to encrypted forums linked to Russian cybercrime networks. She wasn't embedded, more like a contractor. Technical services, paid in cryptocurrency. The words hung heavy. Organized crime, I said quietly. Not as a member, as an asset. But if she feels cornered, she has contacts capable of monetizing your data globally. Identity theft rings, financial fraud, corporate espionage. The scale expands fast. I sank into Catherine's old chair and stared out at Lake Michigan's dark expanse. 2 days ago, I'd hosted dinner. Now I was juggling planted evidence tabloid narratives, sabotage, and the possibility of international data trafficking. Keep digging, I said. I need every name she's worked with. I'm on it, Martinez replied. And James, watch yourself. If she's willing to tamper with brakes, escalation is on the table. After he hung up, silence settled heavily. I thought about Rebecca, 24 when her mother died. Brilliant enough for MIT, driven enough to walk away and shoulder responsibility, capable of breaching a company hardened by professionals, clever enough to misdirect seasoned investigators, connected enough to tap into foreign cyber networks, and angry enough to escalate from theft to attempted lethal sabotage in days. Michael had spoken of her with pride, even while she spiraled. I wondered if he truly understood the depth of her capability, or if love had blurred his view. Parents often see the child long after the adult has hardened. Outside, snow began falling again, soft and steady. Chicago looked deceptively peaceful under white. Somewhere in this city, Rebecca Morrison was recalibrating, planning the next move, perhaps arranging a sale, perhaps something worse. I felt time compressing. The article would ripple. Clients would hesitate. Investigators would circle. And if even a fraction of that data reached the wrong hands, the consequences would ripple far beyond me. Michael and I had hoped to avoid war. Instead, we had stepped into it. And as I stared into the dark beyond the window, I began to understand a harder truth. Even if we stopped Rebecca, the damage might not be containable. The question was no longer whether we could win. It was how much we were prepared to lose before it was over. Nathan walked into my office on the morning of January 4th, without knocking, laptop tucked under his arm, and a look on his face that told me the board had shifted again. "We've been looking at this wrong," he said, setting the laptop down and opening a dense spread of metadata and system logs. "Rebecca's talented, but she's not this consistent. Some of the compromised files carry digital fingerprints that don't match her style." I leaned forward. In English. "Hackers have patterns," he said. "Preferred tools, timing rhythms, cleanup methods. Most of the breach aligns with Rebecca's known behavior. But a subset of the earliest file pulls." He clicked into a hidden properties window. Blackwood Enterprises watermark fragments embedded in document metadata. Not obvious, almost scrubbed, but still traceable. The name hit like ice water. Thomas Blackwood. Someone at Blackwood accessed your systems months before Rebecca's visible intrusion. Copied materials. Probably fed her intelligence. This wasn't just family grievance. It's corporate strategy. I leaned back, the puzzle rearranging itself with disturbing clarity. Thomas Blackwood and I had competed for nearly 3 decades, but one deal defined us: the Millennium Tower development in 1999. Prime downtown property, a make-or-break project. I'd secured better financing, stronger political alliances. I won. He nearly collapsed. I had assumed he'd recovered and moved on. How much did he give her, I asked. Enough to map your sensitive architecture, Nathan replied. Enough to sharpen her breach. And now, he may have stepped back, or he may still be quietly guiding. I grabbed my coat. Blackwood Enterprises occupied 3 floors of a restrained glass tower in the Loop, elegant understatement, signaling entrenched wealth. I bypassed the receptionist with practiced authority and rode up. Thomas stood at his office window overlooking Michigan Avenue when I entered. He turned without surprise. James, he said calmly. I wondered how long it would take. You're advising her. I'm advising a young woman reclaiming what she believes was denied to her family, he replied, voice smooth. Belief matters. You provided internal data. I discussed publicly accessible structural information about Morrison legacy, he said carefully. Hypotheticals. I never instructed her to commit crimes. The precision of his language was surgical. Why I demanded. One deal, Thomas. 25 years ago. One deal. His composure thinned. That deal nearly buried my company. You thrived. I clawed back from ruin. Do you understand what that does to a man? It was competitive bidding. You had connections I didn't, he said sharply. Political leverage, social capital. You didn't win solely on merit. He straightened papers with deliberate neatness. So when Rebecca Morrison approached me months ago asking about vulnerabilities in your structure, I recognized opportunity. Not illegal gain. Strategic recalibration. This is revenge. The difference between revenge and justice depends on perspective. You're destroying innocent clients. Collateral consequences, he replied evenly. You're familiar with that concept. I studied him differently now, not just as a rival, but as a man shaped by humiliation he never metabolized. You can't prove anything, he added. My counsel is impeccable. Without evidence of direct collaboration in criminal acts, I've done nothing unlawful. He was right. Advising, suggesting, guiding without crossing statutory lines. This won't end the way you imagine, I said. From here, he replied, turning back to the window. It's unfolding exactly as anticipated. Your reputation destabilized. Clients uneasy, family fractured. I merely nudged the boulder. Gravity handles the rest. I left without further exchange. He had weaponized restraint. Used Rebecca as proxy while keeping his hands immaculate. Halfway to my car, my phone vibrated, James Cates said tightly. We have escalation. Define. Rebecca filed a civil suit. Public record as of 20 minutes ago. I closed my eyes. On what grounds? She alleges you stole intellectual property from Michael decades ago. Claims he originated core analytical strategies you appropriated to build Morrison legacy. It's fiction, but it's filed, which meant it could be reported freely. Media, I asked. CNN already running with Family Feud turns legal. By tonight, it'll be real estate mogul accused of exploiting twin. The January wind cut hard across the Loop. Weaponized narrative. Legal theater. Cyber intrusion. Mechanical sabotage. Corporate manipulation. All directions at once, I muttered. James Cate continued. Even if the suit collapses eventually, the optics are devastating. It keeps the story alive. And Blackwood, I'm digging into any provable link, but he's insulated. I stared up at his glass tower gleaming against winter sky. This was no longer a single adversary. It was an ecosystem of grievances converging. Shift strategy, I said quietly. We stop absorbing, we counter. Carefully, she warned. You can't appear vindictive. I won't. After we hung up, I remained leaning against the car for a long moment. Blackwood had patience. Rebecca had skill and anger. Michael had regret and desperation. And I had legacy. I thought of Morrison Legacy's founding years scraping by on small listings, Catherine balancing books at the kitchen table, the slow layering of trust that built something durable. This wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about preventing corruption of the story. Rebecca's lawsuit reframed me as exploiter. Blackwood's quiet assistance reframed me as privileged manipulator. The article reframed me as heartless sibling. Narratives can dismantle empires faster than breaches. As I got into the car, my reflection stared back from the window, older, sharper, harder. For decades, I had competed cleanly within the rules. But my opponents were leveraging gray space ethical ambiguity without prosecutable violation. To win, I would need to be precise without becoming ruthless, because the temptation was real. I could release evidence of Rebecca's cyber affiliations publicly. I could expose Blackwood's advisory role in ways that would damage him socially, even if not legally. But doing so recklessly would validate every accusation. I started the engine. This was no longer defensive containment. It was strategic containment. Rebecca had momentum. Blackwood had patience. But I had something neither of them fully understood: endurance. I had rebuilt once from nothing. If necessary, I would rebuild again. The difference now was that I was not fighting a market downturn or aggressive competition. I was fighting narrative warfare, cyber escalation, and generational grievance. And I had to win without becoming the villain they were constructing. As I pulled into traffic, one thought settled with unsettling clarity. The real battle wasn't over property or pride. It was over control of truth. And that was a war I intended to fight carefully and finish. I don't remember deciding to turn toward St. Michael's Church on North Avenue. My hands did it before my mind caught up. Evening traffic had thinned, and the city lights streaked past as if I were driving through memory instead of streets. I hadn't been there in 5 years. Not since Catherine's funeral. The church doors were heavy familiar beneath my palms. Inside, the space was nearly empty. A few elderly parishioners sat scattered across the pews, heads bowed. Candles flickered along the stone walls, shadows stretching and shrinking like quiet breath. I slid into the back row and let the silence settle over me. Catherine had loved this church. It stands still while the world spins, she used to say. Sitting there, I wondered what she would think of the man I'd become surrounded by enemies, calculating strategy, weighing outcomes like transactions. I felt pressed in on all sides, as if every move I made risked turning me into someone she wouldn't recognize. James Morrison. I looked up. Pastor Robert Coleman stood in the aisle, hands loosely folded, expression gentle but attentive. I'd met him at Catherine's service but hadn't returned since. I thought I might see you, he said softly. The news has been loud. Would you like to talk? His office was small, warm, lined with books that looked well used rather than decorative. He poured tea from a simple pot and waited. And I talked. For the first time since New Year's Eve, I didn't edit myself. I told him about Michael, about 65 years of separation, about Rebecca's hacking, Ryan's betrayal over Thanksgiving dinner, Blackwood's quiet manipulation, the break lines, the lawsuit, the headlines, about lawyers telling me what was strategic and investigators telling me what was actionable. But nobody tells me what's right. I finished. Only what I can legally do. Robert set his cup down and studied me for a moment. I was in foster care too, he said quietly. 7 homes before I turned 15. I looked at him surprised. Some were kind, he continued. Some were not. All were temporary. That kind of instability leaves a mark. It teaches you that love is conditional, that permanence is illusion. He gave a faint smile. When I was 17, I nearly ruined my life. Anger makes destruction feel justified. A man at a youth center stopped me. He told me something I've carried ever since. Hurt people hurt people. Healed people heal people. Decide which one you want to be. The simplicity of it cut deeper than any legal argument. Michael and Rebecca are acting from pain, Robert went on. Pain doesn't excuse harm, but it explains it. Your brother lived decades believing he was the one not chosen. Rebecca spent her 20s watching her father decline while drowning in debt. That shapes a person. So what am I supposed to do? I asked. Forgive them and let her destroy innocent people. No, he said firmly. Accountability is necessary. But the purpose of accountability matters. Is it to balance justice or to satisfy vengeance? He leaned forward slightly. I once counseled a man who'd been wronged badly. He had every right to retaliate, and he did. He spent years dismantling the person who hurt him legally thoroughly. He won. But by the end, he'd alienated his children, hardened his heart, and lost the ability to recognize himself. The room felt smaller. Is that the legacy you want? Robert asked quietly. I thought of Catherine, of her insistence that success meant nothing without integrity, of the way she volunteered quietly without announcement, of how she could be fierce in business, but gentle in spirit. You have the power to ruin Rebecca, Robert said. Federal charges, prison, a permanent stain on her life. It would be legal, justifiable. But ask yourself, what would Catherine call that? My throat tightened. I don't know how to show mercy to someone trying to destroy me. Mercy isn't the absence of consequence, he replied. It's the refusal to let consequence become cruelty. See her as a person shaped by damage, not as a monster. Silence stretched between us. Something inside me cracked, not shattering, but yielding. For the first time in days, I let myself cry. Not out of anger or fear, out of exhaustion, out of grief for the randomness that had elevated me and discarded Michael, for the system that shaped us differently, for Catherine who wasn't there to steady me. Robert handed me tissues without comment. Empathy or empire, I murmured finally. That's always the choice, he said. And sometimes empathy costs more than you're prepared to pay. I left the church lighter and heavier at once. The city looked unchanged, but I saw it differently. The buildings no longer symbols of conquest, but structures filled with flawed human stories. As I pulled into my garage, my phone vibrated. Detective Walsh, need to meet first thing tomorrow, he said. Martinez uncovered something about Rebecca's network. It's bigger than we thought. The brief calm fractured instantly. Whatever reflection I'd found inside those stone walls, reality was still advancing. Rebecca wasn't going to stop because I'd rediscovered my conscience. Blackwood wasn't going to retreat. The campaign against me would continue. I sat in the idling car for a long moment. If accountability was inevitable, then intention mattered. I could pursue charges with cold efficiency, or I could aim for containment rather than annihilation. Justice without humiliation. Protection without cruelty. The difference wasn't legal. It was internal. Snow had begun falling again, soft against the garage light. I shut off the engine and stepped into the quiet. I didn't know yet how to balance mercy with responsibility. I didn't know if saving innocent clients and preserving empathy could coexist. But I knew one thing. If I lost my integrity in the process of saving my empire, then the empire wasn't worth saving. Whether I was strong enough to hold that line, time would tell. Before I share what happened in that meeting on the morning of January 5th, the moment that revealed a 15-year-old secret and connected Rebecca's rage to something I never knew I'd done, I want to make sure you're invested in this journey. Drop the word forgiveness in the comments if you're still here and want to know the truth, because what I'm about to tell you will test whether forgiveness is even possible. One more thing. The narrative moving forward includes some creative storytelling shaped for impact and reflection. If that doesn't sit well with you, this is your moment to step away, no hard feelings. But if you're ready to see this through to the end, stay with me. Detective Walsh and Martinez were already in my office when I arrived the next morning, their expressions carrying a weight that made my stomach tighten before either spoke. I had barely slept after my conversation with Pastor Coleman, his words about empathy circling my thoughts, while reality continued sharpening its knives. Federal exposure, Walsh said bluntly. Martinez confirmed deeper connections. Martinez opened his laptop and turned it toward me. Rebecca wasn't freelancing in isolation. Over the last 3 years, she completed at least 6 technical contracts for a Russian cybercrime syndicate operating out of St. Petersburg. Not as a formal member, she kept distance, but as a specialist. Data extraction system, penetration, bypass architecture. Russian networks, I repeated quietly. The Volkov organization, Martinez clarified. On the FBI radar, high-tier operations, corporate espionage, political leverage, infrastructure mapping. Rebecca was paid in cryptocurrency through layered offshore accounts. Careful, but not invisible. Walsh leaned forward. If she transfers your client data to foreign buyers, this escalates beyond extortion. We're talking potential espionage, national security implications, federal charges. I thought of my client roster, 2 sitting senators, a federal judge, corporate executives with government clearances, foreign investors tied to ministries abroad. Their private records in hostile hands could trigger far more than lawsuits. There's more, Martinez added. Last night she posted an auction listing on a dark web marketplace. Entire Morrison legacy database. Starting bid $500,000. 48-hour window, bidders Walsh asked. 3 serious ones. 2 foreign Russian and Chinese-linked entities. The third appears to be a corporate espionage broker. Current high bid $750,000. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. Walsh gestured for speaker. Uncle James. Rebecca's voice was composed, almost clinical. I assume you've seen the auction. Demand appears healthy. You'll face federal prosecution, I said evenly. Decades, possibly, she replied. But your empire will be dust first. This endangers more than me. Good. The word cut. Then her tone shifted softer, fractured. Do you know why I truly despise you? Not just because of Dad, Helen, I said quietly. My mother, Rebecca, continued, voice tightening. 15 years ago when the cancer surfaced, she wrote you, handwritten. Explained that we couldn't afford the experimental treatment doctors recommended. She begged for help. Promised repayment. Weeks passed. No response. My lungs felt hollow. She chose a cheaper protocol instead, Rebecca said. Endured 7 more years of suffering before dying in 2016. She believed you read her letter and chose your wealth over her life. I never saw. That's why I'm burning it down, she cut in. Not for inheritance, for her. The line disconnected. Silence flooded the room. I never received a letter, I said hoarsely. Walsh exchanged a look with Martinez. Certain. Memory surfaced slowly. Clara. My executive assistant, then. She filtered correspondence. I dialed, despite the early hour. James. Clara answered, surprised. Clara, in 2009, did a Helen Morrison send me a handwritten letter. The pause stretched painfully. Oh, James, she whispered. I have to confess something. What did you do? A letter came from a woman claiming to be your sister-in-law, asking for money for cancer treatment. But you'd never mentioned a twin. We got countless fraudulent pleas. I thought it was a scam. I discarded it. The room seemed to tilt. I was protecting you, she sobbed. I believed I was. Helen died in 2016, I said softly. Believing I ignored her, Clara's apology dissolved into tears. I ended the call and sat motionless. Helen had reached out. And my fortress, my guarded infrastructure of assistants and gatekeepers, had intercepted compassion before it could breathe. Rebecca's rage suddenly made devastating sense. This wasn't about competition. It wasn't about childhood separation alone. It was about a daughter watching her mother die, believing help was withheld. James Walsh said carefully, We need decisions. The FBI cyber unit can stage an undercover bid intercept during transaction. But we need 24 hours to prepare. The auction closes in 48. He paused. When we arrest her, do you want maximum prosecution pursued? Espionage enhancements could mean decades. Or do you intend to request prosecutorial discretion? The question felt heavier than any financial calculation. 24 hours earlier, I would have chosen maximum penalty without hesitation. Now Helen's unseen letter lay between us like a ghost. I need time, I said. You have until operational deployment, Walsh replied. After that, federal guidelines dominate. They left. I remained seated, staring at Catherine's photograph on my desk. Success, I realized, had built walls so high even genuine pleas could not reach me. Helen had died outside those walls. Rebecca was trying to destroy them. Was justice prison? Was mercy complicity? Could accountability coexist with healing? Outside Chicago moved through another cold morning, unaware of the moral calculus unfolding above its streets. I considered the options. Allow federal prosecutors to pursue the harshest charges and sever the cycle with force, or cooperate fully, but advocate for a resolution that balanced consequence with rehabilitation, one that acknowledged harm without perpetuating it. Either path would cost something. The empire could be salvaged. Reputation could be rebuilt. But character once compromised rarely recovers intact. I stood and walked to the window overlooking Lake Michigan, its surface gray and restless beneath winter sky. Hurt people, Pastor Coleman had said, but perhaps accountability could be an act of healing if chosen correctly. Helen's memory deserved more than vengeance. Rebecca deserved consequences, but not annihilation. And I deserved the chance to correct the failure that had begun this cascade. The question wasn't whether justice or mercy would prevail. It was whether I had the courage to shape both. I called the family meeting for that evening. Emily and Ryan sat together on the sofa, her hand in his body language defensive. Sarah stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her sister with concern. Kate occupied the chair nearest me, a folder of documents on her lap like ammunition. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "Today I learned things that change everything, about Rebecca's Russian connections, about Helen's letter and why this vendetta runs so deep, about the full scope of what we're facing." I looked directly at Ryan. "And about you." Emily's grip on his hand tightened. "Dad, we've been over this. Ryan made a mistake. He was blackmailed. He was a co-conspirator." Kate interrupted, opening her folder. "Ryan, you told us you were a victim, that Rebecca threatened you, forced you to photograph those documents. Partly true, but you left out something important." She slid a printed email across the table. "Rebecca promised you 10% of whatever she extracted from James. 10% of $8.2 million. That's $820,000. The room went silent except for traffic outside and Emily's sharp breath. "We have your emails, Ryan." Kate continued, pulling out more printouts. "From your personal account discussing the split with Rebecca, asking about payment timing, setting up an offshore account to receive the money. You weren't just a victim. You were a willing participant who stood to profit." Emily's hand slipped from Ryan's like she'd been burned. "What? It's not..." Ryan started, face pale. "I mean, yes, she offered, but I never actually intended to..." "You set up a bank account in the Cayman Islands," Kate interrupted. 3 weeks ago, to receive cryptocurrency transfers. That's not something you do if you're planning to refuse the money. You were going to profit." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "From destroying my father." "I was scared," Ryan said desperately. "She had me trapped. I thought if I cooperated..." The doorbell cut through his words. We all froze. It was past 8 o'clock. Sarah answered it, and I heard her surprised voice. "Can I help you? I'm looking for James Morrison. My name is Jennifer Rhodes. I'm Ryan's sister." Ryan's face went gray. "Oh, God." "Jen, what are you..." Jennifer Rhodes walked in with Sarah. Mid-30s business casual with composed presence that spoke of someone who'd made a difficult decision and intended to follow through. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, looking at me. "And I'm sorry, Ryan, but I can't stay silent anymore." "Jen, please." 2 weeks ago, Jennifer continued. "Ryan told me what he'd done. He tried to frame it as noble, helping a desperate young woman get justice. When I pressed him, he admitted to the 10% arrangement. I told him to stop, to confess, to make this right. She looked at Ryan with disappointment and grief. He refused. She handed Kate a USB drive. Everything you need is here. His emails with Rebecca, their communications, bank records showing the offshore account, transaction logs. I'm a software engineer. I know what constitutes evidence. Her voice wavered. I don't want my brother to go to prison, but I can't let him help destroy innocent people for money. You bitch, Ryan whispered. You're my sister. Which is why I gave you 2 weeks to do the right thing, Jennifer replied quietly. You chose not to. Emily stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. I defended you. Her voice shook with fury and heartbreak. When Dad first accused you, I told him he was wrong. I suggested we just pay them off, because I thought you were a victim who'd made one mistake under pressure. She moved away from the sofa. I chose you over my own father. I stood between you and him, defending you while you were planning to profit $800,000 from destroying his life's work. Well, Emily, please let me explain how you let me believe you were blackmailed. Her voice rose. You let me think you had no choice, that this was all Rebecca's doing. But you wanted this. You wanted that money. Ryan reached for her, and she jerked away. Don't! Don't you dare touch me! She turned to me, tears flowing. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. It's okay, I said, moving to her. Sarah was already there, arm around Emily's shoulders. It's not okay. Emily's voice broke. I chose wrong. I chose him over you, and I chose wrong. She looked at Ryan, and I saw something die in her eyes. The marriage, the trust, whatever love had survived it all, ended in that moment. I want you gone, she said, voice suddenly flat, emptied of emotion. Tonight, move out, take whatever you need. I'll have the rest sent to wherever you end up, but I can't look at you right now. Emily, we can work through this. Get out! The scream came from somewhere primal. Get out of this house. Get away from my family. Just go. Ryan stood frozen, his wife staring at him with betrayal, his sister looking at him with disappointment, me watching him with something that might have been pity. I'm sorry, he said to no one in particular, and walked out into the Chicago night. Through the window, I watched him get into his car, snow falling as he fumbled with his keys. The taillights disappeared, and Emily collapsed into Sarah's arms, sobbing. Kate examined Jennifer's USB drive on her laptop. Jennifer stood awkwardly by the door. Thank you, I said to her. I know that couldn't have been easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. He's my brother, but what he did was wrong. Mr. Morrison? Jennifer said, hesitating. There's one more thing. Rebecca called Ryan this morning. I overheard part of the conversation. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She told him that if you try to stop the auction, if you bring the FBI in, she has a contingency plan. She's uploaded the data to a backup cloud server with a dead man's switch. If she's arrested before the auction completes, the system automatically releases everything to major media outlets and dark web marketplaces. The room went silent. So even if the FBI catches her, Kate said slowly, the data still goes public. What? That's what she told Ryan, Jennifer confirmed. I sat down heavily. Rebecca had thought of everything. Even catching her wouldn't save us. Martinez called early the next morning, his voice carrying the kind of urgency that made my stomach drop before he'd said a word. James, I need to tell you something about Michael. I posed as a family friend and spoke with his oncologist yesterday. The cancer's metastasized to his liver. The doctor was frank. Michael doesn't have 3 to 6 months. He's looking at 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe less if things progress quickly. I sat down heavily in my office chair, staring out at Lake Michigan's gray January waters. 6 to 8 weeks. If I wanted any real time with my brother, if there was any chance of actual reconciliation before the end, I couldn't afford a drawn-out legal battle. The personal urgency crashed into the operational one. Rebecca's auction was ending tomorrow night. Less than 30 hours now, until someone would own the private data of some of Chicago's most powerful people. By the time Detective Walsh arrived with FBI Special Agent Lisa Torres. An hour later, I'd already accepted that the next 24 hours would determine everything. Torres was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp presence that comes from climbing ranks in a male-dominated field. She declined coffee and got straight to business. Mr. Morrison, as of this morning, this is officially a federal investigation. Rebecca Morrison's connections to Russian cybercrime networks, combined with her attempt to sell potentially classified information to foreign entities, elevates this to espionage territory. We're looking at 15 to 20 years minimum in federal prison if convicted. Classified information, I asked. Your client list includes a federal judge and 2 sitting senators. Their private communications, financial records, personal data in the wrong hands. That's a national security concern. She pulled out a tablet showing me organizational charts. The FBI Cyber Task Force has tools local law enforcement doesn't. We can infiltrate dark web marketplaces, create credible buyer profiles, trace cryptocurrency transactions across international borders. Nathan, who joined us, leaned forward. You're going to pose as a buyer. Exactly. We create a buyer sophisticated enough to be credible history of similar purchases. Cryptocurrency wallet with traceable but obfuscated funding sources. Technical knowledge suggesting legitimate use rather than law enforcement. We outbid the competition, win the auction. When Rebecca attempts to complete the transaction tomorrow night, we pinpoint her location and conduct simultaneous raids, physical and digital. Catch her in the act, Walsh added. With the USB drive in hand and the data transfer actively in progress. Airtight case. What about the dead man's switch? Nathan's question cut through the tactical planning. Rebecca told someone she's got a backup server with an automatic trigger. We arrest her, the data goes public anyway. Torres looked at Nathan with new respect. That's the variable. Mr. Brooks, if you had access to Rebecca's system architecture, cloud provider server locations, encryption methods, could you identify and disable the dead man's switch before we move in? Nathan thought for a moment. Possibly. I'd need detailed information. Network diagrams, security protocols, trigger mechanisms. The kind of information Rebecca wouldn't share with anyone unless she trusted them completely. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question. Torres's gaze shifted to me. Who does Rebecca Morrison trust? The answer hung in the air, obvious and terrible. Her father, I said quietly. Michael. Your brother is dying, Torres said not unkindly. In considerable pain from what I understand. And he's watched his daughter become increasingly radicalized in her attempt to avenge what she perceives as family injustices. Mr. Morrison. If Michael could get us that technical information, even just the cloud provider and basic architecture, it might be the difference between preventing and failing to prevent a major data breach. You want me to ask my dying brother to betray his daughter? The words tasted like ash. I want you to offer your brother a chance to save his daughter from spending the next 2 decades in federal prison. Right now, Rebecca's facing espionage charges, computer fraud across state lines, attempted sale of classified information to foreign entities. With her Russian connections, prosecutors will push for maximum sentencing. 15 to 20 years minimum, possibly more. But if Michael cooperates, if he helps us disable that dead man's switch and prevent the data breach, that's substantial assistance. We can work with prosecutors on Rebecca's sentencing. Reduced charges, cooperation credit, possible placement in minimum security. She'd still face consequences, but not 2 decades in a federal supermax. I thought about Michael's face at Navy Pier, gaunt and yellow in the winter light. Thought about Helen's letter that never reached me about Rebecca watching her mother die while believing help was just a phone call away. Michael's already lost his wife, his health, most of his life to circumstances beyond his control. I said, if I ask him to help arrest Rebecca, I might be asking him to lose the only thing he has left, his daughter's love. Or you might be giving him a chance to actually save her. Torres closed her tablet. Mr. Morrison, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen what federal prison does to young people, especially brilliant ones like Rebecca, who get caught up in ideological crusades. 2 decades in maximum security will destroy whatever's left of the person she was. But 5 years in minimum security, with mandatory counseling, she could come out the other side still capable of having a life. The math was brutal. Help us arrest Rebecca, she serves 5 years and comes out at 37 with a chance at rebuilding. Don't help, she gets 20 years and comes out at 52 if she comes out whole at all. I'll talk to him, I said finally. But I'm not promising anything. This has to be his choice, not mine. Michael's suffered enough forced decisions in his life. Torres nodded. Understood. But move fast. The auction closes tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. We need to be in position by 7. If Michael can get us that information by tomorrow afternoon, we have a chance. Any later, and we're moving blind. After they left, I sat in my office watching the city move through its ordinary Wednesday afternoon. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Uncle James? Auction proceeding nicely. 3 serious buyers. 1 Russian, 1 Chinese, 1 from a competitor, Blackwood. Perhaps bid is up to $650,000. By tomorrow night, your secrets will belong to the highest bidder. Audrey. I forwarded the text to Torres and Walsh, then sat in the growing darkness, trying to find the words I'd use when I asked my dying brother to make an impossible choice. I sent the text at 7 that evening, my thumb hovering over the screen for nearly a full minute before I finally pressed send. Need to meet. Tonight. About Rebecca's future, not her crimes. Please. The reply came faster than I expected. Oak Street Beach. 9 p.m. Just us two. The beach was nearly empty when I arrived, January wind tearing off Lake Michigan like something alive. The cold sliced through my overcoat, numbing my face within seconds. Michael stood near the shoreline, a thin silhouette against darker water. Even from a distance, I could see he'd declined further in just days. His frame seemed smaller, swallowed by his coat. The yellow tint of his skin was visible even beneath the dim streetlights. The cancer was moving quickly. I walked toward him, boots sinking into sand, stiffened by frost. Waves slammed against ice forming along the shore, the sound violent and relentless. Rebecca will never forgive me for meeting you again, Michael said without turning. But I'm here. Thank you, I replied, standing beside him, both of us facing the lake as though it might judge us less harshly than people would. I need to tell you what happens tomorrow. The FBI is planning a sting. They'll arrest Rebecca during the auction transaction. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened. The Russian connections escalated this beyond fraud. They're preparing federal charges, computer intrusion, interstate fraud, attempted sale of sensitive data to foreign entities. If convicted, she could face 15 to 20 years. The wind swallowed his whispered response. Jesus. There's more. She installed a dead man's switch. If she's detained before the auction concludes, the system automatically releases the data. My company collapses, your daughter still goes to prison, and innocent people get hurt anyway. He finally turned toward me, and the exhaustion in his eyes struck harder than the cold. Not just illness defeat. What do you want from me? The FBI needs to disable the failsafe before they move. My IT director can do it if we know how she built it. Cloud provider, encryption structure, trigger protocol, anything. You want me to spy on my daughter. I want you to save her, I said quietly. If the data never gets sold, and if she cooperates, prosecutors will consider reduced charges. The agent told me 18 months is possible. With good behavior, less. She'd be free before she's 35. Michael let out a brittle laugh. 18 months for all this. For cooperation. For preventing national damage. For having a father who chose her future over pride. She's all I have left, he whispered. Helen's gone. I'm dying. Rebecca is the only thing in this world that matters. And if you do nothing, I asked, you'll die knowing she's locked away for 2 decades. Is that what Helen would want? He flinched at her name. I learned something, I continued. About Helen's letter. The one she sent me 15 years ago asking for help. His eyes sharpened. I never received it. My secretary threw it away. She thought it was a scam. I didn't know you existed. I didn't know Helen was sick. If I'd seen that letter, I would have paid for everything. The words trembled in the cold air between us. You're telling me you never knew, he asked. I didn't, I said. I failed you without knowing. Let me not fail her now. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he would simply walk away. Then he spoke, voice worn thin. I don't know technical specifics, but Rebecca keeps a notebook. Physical. She never trusts purely digital systems. Password schemas, cloud redundancies, encryption hierarchies. She writes everything down. Where? In her apartment? Logan Square. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a key. She gave me this, in case something happened to her. He held it between us, his hand trembling. I can't do it, he said. I can't break into my daughter's home and steal from her. But you can. I accepted the key slowly. Save her, James, he whispered. Even if she hates you forever. She won't know you helped. Don't tell her, he said sharply. Let her think you betrayed her. Let her hate you. I'll be dead in weeks. I can't die with her believing I chose you over her. The request struck deeper than any accusation had. I'll carry it, I said. She'll never know. He exhaled as though something enormous had been lifted from him. She'll be at Caldy's in Lincoln Park tomorrow. 6 to 8. Public location, secure connections, multiple devices. That's your window. 2 hours. 2 hours to enter my niece's apartment, find the notebook, and pass its contents to Nathan before the FBI operation. I looked at my brother, frail, yellowed, but resolute. In that moment, he was stronger than either of us had ever been as boys. Thank you, I said. Just make sure she lives, he replied, turning back toward the lake. Make sure she still has a chance when I'm gone. I left him standing against the winter wind and drove home with the key heavy in my pocket. As the city blurred past my windshield, another thought formed. If I entered her apartment, I couldn't risk any trace that pointed to Michael. No ambiguity, no possibility she'd ever suspect him. I would need to leave signs of forced entry, leave fingerprints, trigger cameras deliberately. Make it clear I'd acted alone. If someone had to carry her fury, it would be me. By the time I reached my garage, the plan had solidified. Tomorrow evening, while Rebecca conducted her auction, I would break into her apartment. I would find the notebook. I would deliver the information to Nathan, who would relay it to the FBI cyber unit. They would disable the dead man's switch before the arrest. Rebecca would believe I'd betrayed her trust completely. That I'd invaded her home, stolen her safeguards, ruined her leverage. She would hate me with absolute certainty, and Michael would die believing his daughter never doubted his loyalty. Some choices cost money, some cost reputation. This one would cost whatever fragile possibility remained between Rebecca and me. But if hatred was the price of giving her another chance at life, I would pay it. I had built an empire through calculated risks and strategic timing. Tomorrow would be the most dangerous calculation of all, not for business, but for family. And for once, I was prepared to lose everything except the one thing that still mattered, her future. I stood outside Rebecca's apartment building the next morning, Michael's key heavy in my pocket. The 3-story walk-up was pure Logan Square brick facade, narrow stairwell, no elevator. The kind of place a brilliant MIT dropout trying to stay off the radar would choose. Affordable, anonymous, forgettable. I was about to cross a line. Even with a key, entering without permission was still a crime. But if I didn't do this, Rebecca faced 15 to 20 years in federal prison, and everything Michael had risked would mean nothing. The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and detergent. Each step creaked louder than it should have. Third floor, apartment 3B. I paused at the door, listening. Silence. She was supposed to be at Caldi's preparing for the auction. I checked the time. I had a window. The key turned smoothly. The door opened. I stepped inside, closed it softly behind me, and let my eyes adjust. The studio was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 400 square feet. A Murphy bed folded up against the wall. Compact kitchenette. A desk covered with 3 monitors and a high-end laptop that likely cost more than everything else in the room combined. The space was immaculate, minimalist, almost temporary, like someone prepared to leave at any moment. But the walls told the truth. Photographs covered nearly every surface. Rebecca and Michael at different stages of life, birthday candles, high school graduation, hospital rooms. In the later photos, Michael looked increasingly gaunt. A few included Helen, dark hair, gentle smile, the kind of face that radiated kindness. One wedding photo stopped me. Michael and Helen young and unscarred. Michael's face open, unburdened. Helen radiant in a simple white dress, neither of them knowing the road ahead, neither knowing she would one day write a letter begging for help that never reached my hands. I forced myself to focus. Desk drawers first, bills, old receipts, technical manuals, nothing. Bookshelf, programming texts, security protocol references, no notebook. Closet, under the mattress, behind the Murphy bed, hardware. Nothing. 10 minutes passed. My pulse quickened. What if Michael had been mistaken? Think like her. Rebecca trusted paper over digital, but she would also assume someone might search obvious places. The freezer. I crossed to the kitchenette and opened the freezer compartment. Behind frozen meals and an ice tray sat a waterproof Ziploc bag wedged deep into the corner. Inside it, a black moleskin notebook. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. Dense handwriting, small, precise, methodical. Passwords, encryption keys in hexadecimal. AWS backup architecture. Digital ocean redundancy. Server addresses with ports. Dead man's switch trigger conditions. Failover contingencies. Everything. I pulled out my phone and began photographing each page carefully, ensuring clarity and lighting. 47 pages. 47 pages that represented her safety net. I sent the images to Nathan via encrypted channel. Got it. Disabling framework. I was sliding the notebook back into the bag when I heard it. A key scraping in the lock. Ice shot through my veins. The door opened. A young woman stood there holding groceries. Mid-20s. Not Rebecca. She blinked at me in surprise. Oh, sorry. I thought Rebecca said someone might come by. Michael mentioned feeding the cat. My brain latched onto the cat bowl near the window. Yes, I said evenly, all taken care of. Her shoulders relaxed. That's so kind. Tell Rebecca we miss her around here. I will. She stepped back into the hallway, closing the door gently. I stood motionless for several seconds. Then I moved quickly. Notebook back exactly where it had been. Frozen meals repositioned. Ziploc sealed. Apartment as I'd found it. I exited, locked the door, and descended the stairs. No one stopped me. In my car 2 blocks away, I sat gripping the steering wheel, heart still pounding. What had I done? Broken into my niece's apartment. Violated her privacy. Undermined her trust. To save her, Nathan's message buzzed. Confirmed. Dead man's switch architecture identified. Remote neutralization scheduled 6 p.m. System disabled 1 hour before FBI action. Relief washed through me. It had worked. Rebecca's failsafe would be gone before the arrest. The data wouldn't auto-release. Everyone would be protected, except Rebecca, who would still face prison. My phone rang. Michael, Did you get it? His breathing was labored. Yes. Nathan has everything. Dead man's switch disabled at 6. Silence. Then Rebecca called. My stomach tightened. She knows something's wrong. Said her system logged anomalies. She's accelerating the timeline. How? The auction closes at 5 now. Not 7. I checked the time. 2:07 p.m. And after the sale, Michael continued coughing weakly. She's leaving the country. Flight to Moscow at 11 tonight. Moscow? No extradition treaty. If she completed the transaction and boarded that plane, she'd vanish beyond reach. The data sold. Clients compromised. Rebecca untouchable. The FBI sting was set for 7. Too late. They won't be in position, I said. She'll close the deal, collect payment, and disappear before they move. I tried to stop her, Michael whispered. She says it was always the plan. Of course it was. She had layered contingencies. The dead man's switch was just insurance. Escape was the real endgame. I leaned back in the driver's seat, recalculating everything. The dead man's switch would be disabled at 6, but if the auction ended at 5, she wouldn't need it. She'd sell the data, collect funds, and walk away. Nathan's work would be meaningless. Michael's sacrifice wasted. I checked my watch again. Less than 3 hours until the auction closed. Less than 9 until her flight. Save her, Michael said weakly. Even if it costs everything else. The line disconnected. I stared at the steering wheel. This was no longer about neutralizing a system. It was about intercepting her before she completed the sale. Before she stepped onto that plane. Rebecca had been 3 moves ahead the entire time. But now the board had changed. The dead man's switch was no longer her weapon. Time was, and time was running out. We have to move now. Detective Walsh's voice was tight when I called about Rebecca's accelerated timeline. If she boards that Moscow flight at 11 tonight, she's gone. No extradition. The FBI is pushing the operation up to 4 this afternoon. James, we're down to hours. We had already pre-positioned units as a precaution the moment the auction first went live, anticipating a possible acceleration. By 3 o'clock, I was inside an FBI surveillance van parked 2 blocks from the Logan Square coffee shop where Rebecca planned to meet her buyer. The van smelled of stale coffee and overheated electronics. Monitors lined the walls, displaying multiple camera feeds, street angles, the shop entrance, interior tables captured through concealed lenses. Agent Torres briefed her team crisply. At 3:30, Michael Morrison calls his daughter. He's wired. We record everything. 4 p.m., Nathan Brooks disables the dead man's switch. 4:05, when Rebecca hands over the drive, we move. Through the tinted window, I watched Michael approach. He looked worse than the night before, frailer shoulders curved inward, each step measured. A dying man pushing through his final task. He shouldn't have been standing that long in the cold, not in his condition, but stubbornness had always been one of the few things illness couldn't take from him. At 3:30, he stopped outside the shop and dialed. The FBI technician amplified the call, and Rebecca's voice filled the van. Dad, I'm busy. I'm closing the biggest deal of my life. Sweetheart, please. Michael's voice cracked. Don't do this. Don't sell the data. Don't leave. You don't know who I am anymore, she replied coldly. This is who I am. Someone who fights back. Your mother wouldn't want this. Helen wouldn't want you ruining your life. Don't mention Mom. Her anger was sharp enough to cut. Uncle James ignored her when she begged for help. Let her suffer. Let her die thinking he didn't care. He didn't know, Michael said desperately. The letter was thrown away. He never saw it. He would have helped. I believe that. Silence. Then so you're choosing him over me. I'm choosing your future, he whispered. Please, walk away. We still have time. No, Dad. We don't. You made your choice. The line went dead. Michael stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. At exactly 4, my phone vibrated. Nathan, dead man switch offline. Backup servers locked. Torres lifted her radio. All units were live. At 4:04, Rebecca entered the coffee shop. Dark jacket. backpack slung over one shoulder. Focused, controlled. She spotted the man at a corner table and approached. Through the audio feed, I heard her sit. "You have the money?" she asked. "You have the data?" She removed a USB drive. Full Morrison legacy database. 800,000 in crypto. "Let me see it." She handed it across. Instead of money, the man produced credentials. FBI, Rebecca Morrison. "You're under arrest for computer fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." Two agents rose from nearby tables. Rebecca's face flickered shock, realization, fury. She lunged for her phone. An agent grabbed her wrist. A table overturned, coffee splashing across the floor. Customers scattered. Within seconds, they forced her down and cuffed her. "You don't understand," she shouted. "He deserved it." Then she looked up, saw the van, saw Michael. Recognition struck like lightning. "Dad." He saw it too the instant she understood. Something inside him collapsed. He clutched his chest and staggered. I bolted from the van and caught him before he hit the pavement. "Michael, can't breathe," he gasped. It wasn't cardiac. It was grief, raw and catastrophic. His body shook in my arms. "I betrayed her," he choked. "My daughter. You saved her," I insisted. "You kept her from disappearing to Russia. You kept her from 20 years in prison." He couldn't hear me. Agents led Rebecca outside. Cuffed, controlled. She turned her head, locked eyes with her father kneeling on the cold sidewalk. The hatred in her gaze was absolute. "I will never forgive you," she said quietly. Not screamed, not shouted. Stated. Michael flinched as though struck. The agents guided her into the back of an SUV. The door closed. Agent Torres approached. "It's over. The auction's terminated. Data secured. Your company is safe." I sat there on the pavement holding my brother as traffic moved around us, like this was any ordinary Wednesday. We had prevented an international breach, protected powerful clients, neutralized the Russian sale, preserved Morrison legacy. On paper, it was a complete victory, but Michael sobbed against my shoulder, repeating his daughter's name as though it might bring her back. She would serve perhaps 18 months instead of decades. She would not vanish into Moscow. She would have a future, but she would serve that time believing her father had betrayed her. And Michael, with months left at best, would live and die under the weight of her hatred. Torres was outlining next procedural steps: federal processing, indictments, cooperation agreements. I nodded mechanically. The wind cut through my coat. Snow began to fall lightly. We had won the case. We had protected the empire. But as I held my brother, while the only person he loved was driven away in handcuffs, I understood something brutal. Victory in court doesn't feel like victory on a sidewalk. Sometimes you save everything that can be measured and lose everything that matters. And in that moment, kneeling on the cold concrete of Logan Square, I could not tell which loss would hurt longer. I stood in Kate's office on a gray afternoon in late January 2025, 21 days after the FBI had taken Rebecca Morrison out of that coffee shop in handcuffs. Kate sat behind her desk, documents arranged with clinical precision. Rebecca sat across from her in orange prison scrubs. Wrists lightly shackled, a woman who had once commanded digital systems from the shadows and now moved only when permitted. Her public defender, Angela Ross, watched carefully. Michael stood near the window, leaning on a cane, too weak to sit long. I remained by the door. Kate read the agreement. Rebecca Morrison pleads guilty to 1 count of computer fraud and 1 count of identity theft. The United States Attorney recommends 20 months in a federal minimum security facility, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Mrs. Morrison will provide restitution to Morrison Legacy for security costs and complete 200 hours of community service in a cyber awareness program for foster youth. Agent Torres added quietly, "The espionage and conspiracy charges are dropped. Without cooperation, you were facing 15 to 20 years. Rebecca's face did not move. She signed without hesitation. Michael stepped forward slightly. "Becca," he whispered. She didn't look at him, but before the paperwork was collected, She glanced at me, brief, unreadable, then lowered her eyes again. In early February, I helped Michael move into my Gold Coast house. His possessions fit into 2 suitcases, 1 box of photographs, and a plastic bag containing Helen's wedding ring. I carried them upstairs to the guest room overlooking Lake Michigan. The water was gray, rimmed with ice. Michael stood at the window a long time. "I've never had a view like this," he said softly. It was the first time since Catherine's death in 2019 that the house felt inhabited. From mid-February through March, we lived quietly. Every morning we drank coffee at the kitchen table. Michael told me about our mother, how she braided her hair before bed, how she sang while cooking, how she pushed our swings until sunset. He reminded me that I cheated in swing races and that he let me win anyway. We talked about foster homes, about the day a social worker split us because one family could only afford 1 child, about how he aged out of the system with nothing but a duffel bag. I asked why he never came looking. He said he tried once in 1985, then convinced himself I didn't need him. Those 8 weeks changed me. He taught me to sit still, to watch morning light shift across the lake, to understand that presence matters more than power. Rebecca visited 4 times under humanitarian leave. The first visit was strained. She spoke only to Michael, arms folded, eyes avoiding mine. The second visit, she asked about his pain medication. The third, she sat at our dinner table. At the end of the meal, she stood and said quietly, "Thank you for the medicine." She meant me. The fourth visit came at the end of March. Michael had fallen asleep. I stepped onto the rooftop deck. Rebecca joined me, her guard waiting below. We stood in silence over the city lights. "I hated you for so long," she said. "I know. But you didn't destroy us," she continued. "You gave my father dignity. And you gave me a second chance." She looked at me then. Tears gathered, but did not fall. "He's still my father," she said, "and I'm still his brother." By late April, spring softened the city. Cherry blossoms lined the lakefront. Michael declined quickly. Nurses came daily. Emily and Sarah visited often. One afternoon, he asked whether Helen had forgiven him for failing Rebecca. I told him Helen would have seen love, not failure. Michael Morrison died peacefully on April 30th, 2025. Rebecca was present under leave. Emily and Sarah stood nearby. I held his hand. "Thank you for finding me, brother," he whispered. Rebecca collapsed into tears. I held her as she wept. We buried him in early May at St. Michael's Church. Pastor Robert Coleman officiated. The gathering was small family friends, those who had walked through the storm with us. I spoke about forgiveness, about how wealth is measured not in property, but in who stands beside you when everything collapses. I said Michael spent 65 years alone, but not his last weeks, and that mattered. In mid-May, Kate and I revised my will. Morrison legacy would pass equally to Emily and Sarah with protections to keep it intact. The remaining holdings would do the same, and we created the Morrison Marshall Fund, honoring both surnames to support young adults aging out of foster care, housing assistance, scholarships, mentorship. Michael's story rewritten into opportunity for others. Now, in early 2026, I stand on the shore of Lake Michigan and look back to New Year's Eve 2024. I was wealthy then, powerful, alone. I built an empire in steel and glass. But the real legacy is different. 8 quiet mornings over cooling coffee became richer than any contract I ever signed. A brother returned to me just long enough for forgiveness to heal what childhood had broken. A niece chose accountability over vengeance. And from our fractured past grew hope for children who might otherwise face Michael's lonely road. The buildings still stand. Morrison legacy still thrives. But the empire that matters is written in forgiveness. And that is the only one worth leaving behind. Before you close this window, let me leave you with something that cost me 7 decades to learn. God gave us time not to build empires, but to build bridges. I spent 72 years chasing success, and it took my brother's dying breath to teach me what mattered. Don't be like me. Don't wait until someone is gone to say you're sorry. Don't let pride destroy what love could heal. This family story taught me that dad revenge, whether it's my anger at Michael for leaving or Rebecca's dad revenge against me for abandoning her father, only multiplies pain. Every act of dad revenge I witnessed or considered became another brick in the wall separating us. The real victory was not in destroying Rebecca or protecting my empire. It was in choosing forgiveness when vengeance felt justified. Look at your own family story tonight. Is there someone you've cut off? Someone you've refused to forgive? I'm telling you, the cost is too high. Life is shorter than you think, and bitterness is a prison you build for yourself. Every family story carries wounds, but also the possibility of healing. If this story moved you, I'd be honored if you'd leave a comment sharing your thoughts, or perhaps your own journey toward reconciliation. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories that challenge us to live with greater compassion, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I want to be transparent. Some elements in the stories ahead are shaped for educational purposes and may include creative interpretation. If that doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other content that better fits your preferences. May you find the courage I couldn't find sooner.